Yeah, and so we have our next presenter coming up right now. We have Willem Olding from ChainSafe. He does amazing work on our solutions in the Mina-rs implementation. And he enjoys juggling things such as balls, hoops, and decentralization versus scalability versus security, the classic trilemma. He's going to be talking about fairer airdrops, sorry, and work that he's done into that. So I'm super excited for this, and I'd like to welcome Willem up to the stage.
Hello, am I here? It's all working?
Yep, you're here. We're all working.
Cool. Thanks for the
floor is
intro.
yours. Yeah, absolutely. It's all.
Sweet. All right, let's get the slides. Let's do it. Chrome tab. Okay, how does it look to everyone? It's fine? Yep. Good. Okay, great. Yeah, morning, everyone. It's like quite early here. I'm calling in from Tasmania, Australia, and yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for coming to my session. And yeah, as mentioned, I'll be talking about kind of some work we did with Solutions about airdrops, which like never ended up seeing the light of day until now. So yeah. And as also mentioned, I'm here kind of repping the ChainSafe Solutions team. Currently, there's just 3 of us. And yeah, I've got to say, like, of all the jobs I've had, this is like by far my favorite one. It's really fantastic. So with this little team, and we work with people like internally and external teams as well, just doing like the kind of stuff that, you know, your developers probably don't have time for. So things around the protocol design or integrations, just like scoping things out, prototyping, designing crypto economic things, and yeah, just stuff like that. So if there's any kind of work of that type that you kind of have been putting off and need to get done, yeah, definitely reach out and maybe we can help you out. And so, as I mentioned, there's currently just 3 of us. There's Belmar, head of solutions, Jagrit, a solutions engineer, and there's me. And I think like 2 out of 3 looking like pretty professional in this slide. But we're looking to expand the team like massively. So if you see any kind of job advertisements with like solutions engineer or R&D engineer, definitely like you should apply and come work with us. Okay, and so what I wanted to present on was, yeah, what we call like fairer airdrops. This is like a bit of investigation we did. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily about fairer airdrops, but it's kind of about asking a question. What if you needed to like bootstrap a proof of stake currency without doing any kind of ICO, and you just wanted to airdrop the whole thing? Like, would that be possible? Could it be secure from the start? And what kind of like steps would you have to take and considerations? All right, and like, I guess an airdrop kind of comes down to like the idea of issuance, but it comes down to doing it like all in one go. Normal currencies, like issuance is like a fundamental property. So like in your like national fiat things, I mean, I don't actually know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure they're issued through like some kind of reserve bank lending to like commercial banks, which then extend loans to people. And I guess the money kind of makes it into the economy that way. If someone actually knows how that works, let me know. Bitcoin, though, much simpler. Like the issuance was entirely done through mining. So like every Bitcoin in existence was kind of like, you know, issued through this mining thing. But that took a long time. And doing something like that again doesn't really seem super feasible at the moment. And so some projects kind of ways of doing issuance, including airdrops, which is what we're going to talk about, or Faucet, which is kind of like a free, endless airdrop, or some other kind of creative means. But by far, like the most common thing that we're seeing is like the pre-sale, which I guess is like, you know, people just exchanging some other currency for this new currency, or ICO, the same, I guess, but more open. And so, as I mentioned, like we're asking the question, like, could you bootstrap a proof of stake chain economy without going through this like pre-sale ICO stage. Am I still here? Am I just stop talking into the void? It's weird not getting any kind of noise or feedback or anything.
Good. You're good. You're chilled.
Oh, sweet. Thank
Great
you.
stuff. Yep.
Okay. And so, like, what are some things to consider for proof of stake chain issuance? And like the key one is that the network has to be secure from the start. So you kind of accidentally issued like a controlling share to any one party. Kind of secondary to that, you want to limit the damage that any one single party can do on the market, for example. So if you were to distribute large chunks of your circulating supply to like people who are disinterested or actively hostile towards your project, they could do some damage that way. There are also the goals that, like, you know, the reason you're kickstarting this economy is because you want people to engage with it. So you want people who might be interested in, you know, building on this new system, or even just like being able to pay the fees to engage with dApps on it. You want to make sure that it reaches the wide number of people that are interested. And finally, you want to facilitate the ongoing issuance. So you're not going to issue probably all of the currency this way. You want it to be able to facilitate what's going to keep happening, which is people getting stake rewards and possibly inflation that way, or maybe just, you know, decaying issuance through stake rewards. And so thinking about like what's an airdrop if we like distill it down into its most like fundamental steps. And I kind of came up with these three steps that you probably can't break down much further. So the first step is a snapshot. So you want to capture some state of, it could be account balances, or it could be any other kind of state in one or more existing systems. And these systems could be like blockchains or cryptocurrencies, or actually they could be something totally different. You could be capturing, you know, the state of people's Twitter activity or anything like that. So there's actually really no limit to what you could snapshot. And I think we've seen some interesting things in the past, but I think also there's like a lot of space to explore here in the types of activity that you can capture in a snapshot. And so the second phase is kind of this like calculation phase. So you're taking the snapshot and applying some function to it to calculate how much every new account in this new system should be owed in this airdrop. And this is kind of like what's going to be like our main design space. Like this is where we can get really creative and kind of account for different things that will lead to the goals we set up in the first slides. And the final stage is the distribute or make claimable. So that's either like dropping the tokens in people's wallets or making it, you know, some way that they can go ahead and claim these in the new currency. And so each of these steps, there's kind of like, yeah, some things we can explore and play with in order to get what we want. So let's take a look at the first step. The main question is, where would we want a snapshot from? And so that's a stake, like a hammer and a stake, in case you didn't get that. So where would you snapshot from? It makes sense to snapshot from another proof of stake chain because likely there are, you know, actors in that network who both like know how to run a staking node and, you know, have the desire to do so. And so if we were airdropping to those people, chances are they'd be willing to move across and stake on our new chain. And there's also the case that we're not limited to a single location. I don't know if I've seen this happen before. I wasn't able to find an example, but there's no reason that, you know, you have to snapshot on Ethereum and then you know, drop to a new chain, or a snapshot on Cosmos if you're deploying a new Cosmos zone. You can just do a whole bunch of them and reward people accordingly. And it would be cool to see an example of that one day. And so the second phase, the calculate phase, this is where things start to get like a bit more interesting. So what could we do in terms of calculating? Let's assume that we're snapshotting wallet balances. Oh, I think I forgot to mention that, like, in the snapshot phase, like, it's important that this is kept secret, right? Normally you would take a snapshot and then announce the fact that you're doing an airdrop and that the snapshot had already taken place to avoid any kind of gaming of the system. Okay, so say we captured wallet balances. How are we going to calculate what the proportional amount that each wallet should receive? So one way we could do it is make it actually proportional to the snapshot balance. So if you have, 10 atoms, you will get, 10 times some number of our new balance. Or the other way we could do it, I guess, is giving like an equal amount to each account. So if you had an account on Polkadot, each one of these gets 5 new tokens on the new network. And both of these have been done. I guess the equal amount's kind of similar to the Uniswap drop a little bit, although I guess it had the condition that you'd previously interacted with the DApp. But, is there something else that we could do? And what would be the problems of each of the ones above? And so, like, there's a pretty clear problem that comes with proportional rewards or proportional drops. And we can kind of quantify this a little bit. So this plot shows all of the accounts on Ethereum basically broken down into 20 separate bins. And there's like an equal number of accounts in each bin, basically. So you could say that each of these is like a 5th percentile of the accounts. And then the y-axis is the mean balance in each of those accounts. So on the far left, you can see like these are all the accounts with the balance. Oh, it's a cockatoo. It just flew into my window. These are the balances with like a small number of ether between 0.099 and 0.11, and then all the way up to the higher end of people holding between 25 ether and like 2 million ether. And you can see that like if we take the mean of each of these bins, that like the upper 5th percentile like just dominates the entire thing. So if we were to airdrop proportionally, then the upper 5th percentile of ether accounts are going to dominate our new thing. And depending on how many people are in this top 5th percentile and what their motivations are, it doesn't necessarily seem like the way to have a healthy functioning economy. So like I would imagine that a lot of these upper 5th percentile accounts are exchanges, or I guess you're just good old-fashioned whales. And so there's potential for them to kind of wreak havoc. And so taking some cues, I guess, from Gitcoin and the idea of quadratic funding, there's this notion of a quadratic airdrop. And so in a quadratic airdrop, instead of just distributing the new currency exactly proportionally, you kind of raise the snapshot amount to some exponent k between 0 and 1. And so if we take the extremes of this range, if k is 0, this means that it's an equal drop per account. So every account gets the same. Close, or if it's 1, this means we have the linear increase with balance. But we have this range in between, which we can play with. And so setting it to 0.5 would be like a square root roll-off, which I think is the same as the Gitcoin quadratic adjustment. But actually, we're free to play with this. And because you would already have snapshot the different balances, you can kind of adjust this parameter and see what impact that's going to have on the distribution across your snapshot. And so I guess just a quick visualization, although maybe this is like obvious, but like for different values of k, you get kind of a different roll-off as the snapshot balance increases. And you can kind of visualize it this way. And so effectively it has the effect of increasing the amount or the relative amount given to smaller accounts and decreasing the relative amount that would have been given to larger accounts compared with the linear model. Cool, okay. And so this becomes really interesting when we actually kind of visualize it on the plot I showed previously. So these are the different values, or some different values of K, and how they adjust the mean reward for each of the bins. So on the left is the same plot as before with K equals 1. But in the middle is K equals 0.5. And you can see that now, you know, as I guess mentioned, on the far right, they've kind of been compressed. And on the left, they've been expanded. And it looks like a much kind of healthier distribution across the range of different wallet balances. And taking K to 0.25, you can see that we're approaching the kind of level thing. And so, yeah, because you would have access to this data, you would be free to kind of adjust this, and based on some requirements you might have, kind of figure out like what's a nice shape of curve that you'd be happy with for your distribution. Okay, and so that was kind of like the quadratic airdrop adjustment. But what other kinds of things might be useful? Remember that we're still following this goal of trying to bootstrap a proof of stake chain. And so it might make sense to give extra rewards to accounts that are already staking on the Snapshot chain, if it is indeed a proof of stake chain or chains. And it's reasonable to assume that they might stake on this new one, particularly if they're getting extra rewards from that. And so our airdrop strategy is kind of growing in its name, and it's now a quadratic stake-weighted airdrop. So in this model, the amount you receive in the drop is proportional to our kind of quadratic term from before, multiplied by this new factor, which would be the number of unstaked plus sigma times the number of staked divided by the total. And this adds a new parameter and something for us to play with. And so this new parameter sigma is the extra reward factor. So for example, sigma equals 5 would mean that for every item of the currency on the previous chain you held that was staked, you would receive 5 times more reward for that. And it's all adjusted still by the quadratic curve. And this strategy was used. I can't actually remember the name of the chain. I think it was either a Cosmos or a Polkadot one. But this idea of a kind of stake adjusted airdrop has been used in the past. And I mean, there's so many more different things that we could do in this calculate phase, but I mean, I'll just cover a couple of them. But by the end of this, we should now have a list of accounts that are eligible to receive a drop. We should have some amount per account. And this, just to clarify, like this should be totally off-chain. So, our snapshot was done on-chain, but we took the data off-chain and we did this entire kind of adjustment thing off-chain. But crucially, it should be publicly verifiable. There needs to be a way for people to also go and recapture the snapshot data. So you should have released the block height maybe, or some kind of other way for people to unambiguously find the data that you snapshot from. And then all of the calculation and the function that you applied to it should be made public as well. So people can also go ahead and apply the same function and check that they got the same thing and that you aren't injecting malicious airdrop balances in there to give extra to you or your friends or whatever your motives might be. And then there is the final phase, the distribute phase. And so how can we go about doing this? So if we're launching a brand new proof of stake chain, which was the goal, there's no need to kind of worry about this too much because you can bake the allocations directly into the Genesis block. And I think most of the kind of blockchain frameworks would have a way to do this, or certainly in Polkadot and Tendermint. SDK. But there's kind of one consideration here, which is like, you don't actually know that all the things that you snapshot are actually live accounts, and you don't know that they're actually interested in receiving your new currency. So there's a possibility that like a huge chunk of your circulating supply could be kind of, allocated to these inactive wallets, which would just be like a real shame, and it seems kind of unnecessary. And I guess like, yeah, it's just not a good way to kind of, start off a whole beautiful fresh currency. Like, I suppose people have a pretty good idea about, which Bitcoins have been lost and are in locked wallets. But if you did get to start a whole new one from scratch, you wouldn't like to start with a whole bunch of it lost. And so one way to kind of work around this would be to have a registration period. So this would take place on chain somewhere. I guess it doesn't necessarily need to be in the chain that you're launching or the chain that you're snapshotting from. But I think either of those would probably be a smart choice. And yeah, participants would need to register by providing some kind of proof of ownership of an account, which the easiest way to do is just by providing their public key signed by the private key. And so this would be like a fixed term for registration. And after it closes, you would distribute the total airdrop allocation among the registered participants, ignoring those that didn't successfully register. So this seems like a good way to kind of like avoid this problem and make sure that the people who you're airdropping to are actually those that are interested. And so in the calculation phase, what you would be calculating is not necessarily the amount that each would receive, but I guess kind of a weighting per account. And then after the registration period, you would remove all of those that did not register and use the weights to allocate the airdrop allocation. And another kind of thing to consider in the distribute phase is that you don't just need to kind of give it to people for nothing. You can kind of make them work for it. And you can use that to influence, positive behavior that's going to help your network from the start. So some examples would be, you have to actually participate in voting and governance, for example, before you actually are eligible to receive your airdrop. Or maybe you receive some chunk of it for each time you vote. Another really interesting one is that you have to actually, participate in the staking. And you could actually have the airdrop rewards held in some kind of escrow and released as additional stake rewards. So all of those who were airdrop eligible, who then go on to become stakers, would, at least in the earliest parts of the network, would be receiving like these additional stake rewards from the airdrop escrow. And that seems like a really good way to kind of incentivize stakers to get in there early and make sure the network is secure as it can be, like right from the genesis. And so to kind of summarize our design space when coming up with a kind of fairer, safer airdrop, the first step is snapshot, and you've got to make sure you do it in secret, because otherwise people can get in there and kind of manipulate the results. And you're not limited to capturing just balances from one chain. You can capture any kind of state on any number of chains or non-chains. Just, you've got a lot to work with there. Next, you want to calculate, and this design space is like pretty huge, and there's a lot of room for creativity. And it's important to consider that all of the decisions you make here are going to affect, all of the accounts. But because you have the snapshot, you can actually see that effect that you're going to have, and kind of make sure you manipulate it to get something that you want. You probably want to have a registration to ensure that your circulating supply doesn't end up uncirculating and lost. You can have incentives, and you can kind of make sure that people who are interested and joining the network do things that are useful to you to make it safe. And then finally, if all went well, you can kind of launch with this sound new economy without having to have an ICO. And so the name of our kind of strategy has kind of grown a bit over the few slides, but I think we would call it a quadratic stake-weighted registered stake drop, which I think has a pretty cool ring to it. Awesome. And I guess as I mentioned at the start, and probably every other ChainSafe person to present so far has mentioned, but we're hiring like a lot. And yeah, it's just the sweetest place to work. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And in particular, yeah, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, or prototyping or research in general, maybe a job in the solutions team is for you. So yeah, be sure to check that out. If you want to hit me up, these are my handles. Probably Twitter's not the best, but Discord or Instagram, GitHub, feel free to reach out. And thanks for coming to my session.
Awesome. That was sweet, Willem. That was a great presentation. I love that. And it seems that a lot of people did, because we have a good amount of questions for you if you're willing to take on some of these.
No worries. I'll do my best.
Sweet. Okay. So the first one I'm going to throw at you is there a project that you know of that has exemplified the most fair airdrop to date? And then maybe hopefully they don't mind, if I add on a little part of that, is the definition of fair ambiguous? Is there a concrete definition of what fair means in this sense?
Oh, it's totally ambiguous and like totally subjective. Like, but it's a funny thing. Like, I guess you have a lot of power, right? If you're the one kind of like setting the parameters for an airdrop, it's like a pretty unusual position to be in. But no, I just called it a fair airdrop because I thought it sounded cool. It's not necessarily fair at all.
I mean, it sounds fair to me. But so then, is there a project that exemplifies fairness best in how they've done airdrop, like in your opinion?
Yeah. So obviously, like I tried to find all the examples of airdrops that had ever happened when I was doing this research originally. I think like in general, the bar was set pretty low, but people were in more recent times starting to get pretty creative. I probably won't drop in names of projects, but like, yeah, like the idea of doing a quadratic drop and of a stake drop kind of came from some projects launching on Cosmos, and I thought that was pretty cool. So that seems to be where the kind of innovation was happening.
Sweet. So if any of these, like, if you don't want to name drop, just we can move on to the next question. So
I was really the entire time.
Yeah. So the next question is, in your mind, did you view the ENS airdrop as a fair approach at rewarding early adapters? And like I said, if you don't want to comment on specific projects, we can go to other questions.
I don't even know if I'm familiar with that one. Is that like a really recent one?
I think it did happen recently. The Ethereum naming service, I think there was a relatively recent airdrop. I don't know the details of it though.
Yeah, I can't say I'm familiar with it, so it might have happened after I did the initial looking.
Yeah.
So I guess I can't really speak to that one, but yeah, I'll look into it.
That's fine. So then the next question we have is, what's a good real world metaphor or analogy for airdropping that illustrates the difference between a fair and unfair airdrop? Like what does that mean, and what does that look like in other situations?
Yeah, so I guess like, yeah, as I mentioned, like the idea of fair is like pretty subjective, and I guess what we were really designing wasn't necessarily a fair airdrop, but like a safe and effective one, from the interests of the people trying to launch a new proof of stake thing. But an analogy for the real world, like maybe from economics or something like that, definitely not our current economic system. Gee, I don't know. That's like a really strange question. I like it. Because like, does this stuff kind of happen in the real world? You know, like do currencies kind of get bootstrapped and like dropped? And like, I guess they must have done, right? Like, but yeah,
like initial allocation.
Someone like creates a whole new currency in the real world.
Yeah, that is interesting. I like how like a centralized currency might just do an initial distribution of their currency. Huh.
Although that it must have happened. So like,
Like
yeah,
it came from somewhere.
yeah,
Huh.
totally.
Yeah.
Stimulus checks by the US government. I guess it's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because like,
Yeah, US airdrop.
because you can't really do like a civil type of attack on things like that because like the government has a pretty good idea of like who everyone is. Um, so like, it's not quite in the same space as the crypto ones. Just because of like the dissociation between like actual individuals and accounts. Um, hmm.
Well, cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, a good question to ponder for everyone.
These questions are awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So then the next question is, are these approaches and solutions that you've talked about in your presentation, are these concepts that already existed or have been used, or is this stuff that you've kind of come up with in your own research?
Yeah, so definitely the quadratic airdrop has been used before, and the stake drop has been used before, and those are the kind of main two that we kind of latched onto just because they're pretty cool ideas. And so like, yeah, I guess this presentation was less about like prescribing a thing, but more about like describing the design space and like where you can start fiddling with things. And so like, yeah, it was more of a kind of, a rallying call and like let's start getting a bit more creative and interesting with drops. But yeah, like those two main things, I guess that I spoke about have both been used. I don't think they've been used together, but I think they've been used separately. But I could be wrong. It all happens so fast.
No, that's awesome stuff. And I think it's great to think about because it really is important when you're designing a system. And if you desire it to be fair, it's definitely stuff you have to think about. So great work. I don't know if you're going to want to answer this one, and that's fine. But what's been the worst airdrop you've seen so far?
I think we've all seen the ones that just like drop to every Ethereum address. Like you just like check your wallet one day and there's just like 10,000 random things of some kind. And like, maybe not anymore because it's too expensive to do that. But like, I remember that kind of happening a bunch and like, they're still worthless. So like, it was obviously a very unsuccessful, like airdrop. So it would have cost them like, so much in gas to like launch a contract that has a balance in every account and it's led to something worthless. So I think that's an example of like exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, my favorite part of that is that the number you picked was 10,000, which like just it'll go to $1. It will, I swear. So we have two more questions on here. So if you're participating in governance, like you said, earning your portion of the airdrop through like staking or participating in governance, does that mean that you'll be participating in a non-token based governance system in that point, or for staking, how would staking work pre-airdrop?
Yeah. So I think this would be, at least the way I've seen this done before, is that if you remember, like, actually no, I didn't have a slide for that, but you would receive some portion of it in advance, and then be able to receive the remainder of it from doing the incentive kind of tasks. And so yeah, like obviously, like if it's a stake drop, you have to be able to stake something to then receive the bonus as rewards. So you have to receive a chunk first. And presumably, yeah, if you're voting, it would be like weighted voting. And if you're staking, it's, normal staking. And then you would receive, kind of bonus that way. But you'd have to receive some originally for it to work. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that wasn't really clear, actually, was it? Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be to where like a non-token based voting system rewards tokens. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's different avenues there. I don't know. But so we have one more question from Phil. So do you see many similarities of airdrops with traditional fundraising with VCs, angel investors, or IPOing? Are airdrops if designed responsibly, a step in the right direction for advancing finance?
Gosh, definitely not my area of expertise. I don't even know what half of those things are. But like, yeah, I guess like, you know, we all kind of lived through the era of the ICO boom. Or maybe we all didn't, but like, I think a lot of us would have. And like, it seems like, yeah, people are really moving into different things these days. And it seems like the airdrop's kind of growing in popularity, at least. And like, to me, it feels like a step in the right direction, particularly for projects that don't necessarily need to raise funds. Like, I guess that was the funny thing about the ICOs is that, like, you know, you generally could make a token contract pretty cheaply. You'd get all your money and then you would start working on the project. Whereas I think like an airdrop's more appropriate for when you actually have kind of completed a project and then you're trying to just bootstrap the economy. To me, it seems like a step in the right direction, but yeah, I'm sure there would be like a pretty fun discussion to have around this, and maybe we can later in the conference floor.
Awesome. I think that's a great answer. I also think and certainly hope that it's a step in the right direction. I think so. Great stuff. Great presentation. Great answers. As always, thank you so much, Willem, for sharing your time. You do great work. We appreciate it and keep it up. And yeah, again, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. That was super fun. All right.
Sweet. See you later.